and welcome to this Lesson 8 session of the Hebrew Bible Institute for this quarter. We're so excited that you're here with us today. Joining me is my good friend John Lyons and Pastor Alexander Bolotnikov. And today we're going to be focusing on John chapter 8. And we're going to start off by reading John chapter 8, verse 12, if you would.
Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life.
It's so interesting that Jesus refers to himself as the light of the world. Why is he using that phrase in particular?
Well, first of all, John, the author of the gospel, used this first, and we can look at verse John chapter 1. Let's see verse 1 through 5.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of man. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it.
Okay, so in him, in whom?
In Jesus?
Yeah, because this is the whole beginning of the gospel. In the beginning was the Word. And by the way, in the beginning refers back where?
Genesis, creation.
Yeah. And it says, in the beginning, God created
The heavens
heaven
and the
earth.
Yeah.
And the first thing he says, let there be light.
Yeah.
So basically, what Jesus is referring here, he's declaring himself a creator. He says, I am that light. And basically, that's why he makes this connection and a statement about him being a creator, and that's immediately was like a pushback.
Yeah, because the Pharisees immediately challenge him. What do they say, John?
You are testifying about yourself. Your testimony is not true.
Yes, that's very important to understand why Pharisees are thinking this way. See, in the previous lessons, we talked about Sadducees, and that they not only rejected, but they actually were behind the plan to kill Jesus, and their motive was purely political. There was nothing to do with even the faith in God. But with the Pharisees, it's a little different story. So when Pharisees say, you testify about yourself, what the problem with Pharisees very often is like this. Let's go to John chapter 2, and there we know that Jesus basically is dispersing this market in the temple, inside the temple, and kicks out all these merchants, and basically acts like a divine power to do this, and that because think about this. What is he doing to actually chase them out?
It says he made a whip out of cords and drove them from the temple courts.
Okay, so think this way. Imagine Mall of America. Somebody takes a cord or a whip and starts hitting at people trying to kick them out. How long will he be able to do it?
Not long.
Not long.
I estimate less than 2 minutes at most.
Yeah, until the security shows up and, subdue him, right? So, if you want to really drive out people from the Mall of America, you need to come with a big suitcase and scream something.
Yeah.
Then people will run away.
Right.
So the only way, and I agree with what we see in the book Desire of Ages, where it is written that he manifested divine power, and there was more than just a whip that made people at least fear and be driven away.
I mean, the temple has guards, too.
Yeah, nobody tried to overpower him because they were scared. So that's the reason why I give the whole background about this, because after this happens, read what verse 18 says, John chapter 2.
The Jews then said to him, "What sign do you show us as your authority for doing these things?"
What else are they looking for?
Who sent you?
That's
On whose
right.
behalf?
So they're basically looking for some of their authority to endorse him.
But they're not going to find it.
Did someone endorse you? That's the question.
Yeah. Did you have permission to do what you just did?
Well, logically, we would do too.
Of course.
When you take your children to pediatrician, wouldn't you want to look at the wall and see the board certification?
Yeah, absolutely. I always think about, like, what if some random person came into our churches and started telling people to get out? And our immediate response would be like, what's wrong with this person? Why are they forcing everybody out? Are they crazy? Like, what's happening, So I think it's a normal reaction.
Yeah, I mean, somebody shows up at the church and says, "Can I preach? I have a message."
Yeah.
We wouldn't allow that.
Are you vetted? Did you get permission from the conference?
Does it make sense to do this, or are we quenching the spirit?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, because unfortunately we do have quite a few mentally unstable people, or people with a very strange idea. So we do want, when you have to look at the resume of prospective pastor, wouldn't you want to look at whether he has MDiv or not?
Well, yeah, I mean, the most common question that we ask is, tell us about your call into ministry. We're looking for that experience with Christ. And then another question we ask is, where do you stand on the 28 fundamental beliefs? What do you think about Ellen White? You're looking for those fundamental questions to show if they're in the same belief system as us, which, hearkening back to this verse, that's clearly what the Jews are looking for. On what authority do you have to do what you are doing?
Exactly. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
And even if somebody says, "Well, I've been called to ministry. I've been a Sabbath school teacher, and all of this checks," you probably want him to go get a little more education if he doesn't have any, right?
Yeah. And also, call references. Who's saying that it's okay for you to do this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's absolutely normal.
Yeah.
So they're not really bad, but what's the problem? The problem is that Jesus very often demonstrates his credential by performing miracle, and they do not accept supernatural miracles. They're looking for human references to Jesus. Nicodemus is the only exception. Take a look what Nicodemus says after all these doubts and things. Look what he says to Jesus. Chapter 3, verse 2.
This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you have come from God as a teacher, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him.
So you see, these signs, and of course the scripture, that's basically what caused Nicodemus to actually accept that, hey, he doesn't need any human references. And by the way, Nicodemus was one of the rabbis. In fact, we will see back in the same chapter, John chapter 7, 50 through 52.
Nicodemus, he who came to him before, being one of them, said to them, Our law does not judge a man unless it first hears from him and knows what he is doing, does it? They answered him, You are not also from Galilee, are you? Search and see that no prophet arises out of Galilee.
So what is Nicodemus here trying to do?
He's trying to show that Jesus has the authority that they're saying he doesn't have.
Yeah, so basically what he's trying is, it's kind of interesting, and that precedes our story in chapter 8, because they discuss why is he Messiah and why is he from the Galilee, and they have all kinds of debates. But there are many who are accepting him, and so some says, no one speaks like this man, and here's how they object to this. To when people say no one speaks like this man. Take a look, chapter 7, 47 through 49.
The Pharisees then answered them, You have not also been led astray, have you? No one of the rulers or Pharisees has believed in him, has he? But this crowd, which does not know the law, is accursed.
So they try to prove that none of their leaders accepts him. That's why we're not going to accept him. And you are just illiterate people. We don't respect you, so you need to listen to us. So Nicodemus comes in and says, Hello, guys, let's talk about how fair we are according to the Torah. And they shut him off.
It's really interesting because Nicodemus is in a very tenuous political situation because he is a Pharisee, but he also believed Jesus. So he's trying to maintain his position while also being a follower of Jesus here. And you could see that as like one of the things we talk about in the Adventist church is you want to do change from within, right? So maybe Nicodemus is like, well, maybe I can help change from within, but it's not going anywhere.
With that kind of crowd, definitely doesn't go anywhere. But it doesn't mean that all Pharisees are rejecting him.
Right.
So, unlike Sadducees, and the faction of Sadducees was smaller and more elite, and they were united in desire to have a political power. Pharisees are very diverse. They listen to different rabbis. And so we're going to find throughout the Gospels that to one Pharisee in Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, he says, you're not far from the kingdom of God. So the number of Pharisees who dined with Jesus and were okay. But there was this contingent of Pharisees, especially those in Jerusalem. They were very resistant. And that's why even Nicodemus, who was figure of authority. And, they kind of, we're not going to listen to you.
Would the Pharisees that are based out of Jerusalem be the ones that have the highest level of sort of power and authority amongst the Pharisees, or was it sort of more spread out? Because as you're describing them, it sounds like a group of scholars, but with maybe a hierarchy.
It didn't really matter among the Pharisees, whether they are from Jerusalem or from the Galilee. But it is very typical within the Pharisaic circles to express the difference of opinions.
Okay.
What we see as a pattern, Galileans definitely accept Jesus more than Jerusalemites. Mm-hmm. Although, as we saw in the previous lessons, Jerusalemites took the palm leaves and said, "Save us, the Son of David, Hosanna." So it's the society was split on the matter, and definitely certain Pharisees were stubborn because, again, as we just discovered, they don't want to accept him because no one of their leader, no one of the figures of authority they recognize is accepting him. Mm-hmm. But it's very, very it's very subjective, because here Nicodemus comes, we don't want to listen to you.
Yeah, well, it is interesting because we're talking about Nicodemus saying, hey, you know what? Let him come and talk before us. That's what our laws say, mm-hmm. right? And then when we go back to John chapter 8, which is where we started, they're challenging him and saying, you're appearing as your own witness, but your testimony isn't valid, even though you're being your own witness. So it's almost like Nicodemus was like, hey, you need to let him testify, but then they're saying you have an invalid testimony.
And there is a reason for it. We intentionally showed that there were Pharisees who accepted him. Mm-hmm. Their testimony wasn't accepted among this group of Jerusalemite Pharisees. And what we're going to see in chapter 8 is the story that actually is very confrontational. Jesus really confronted the Pharisees. Take a look at John 8, verse 3 through 5.
The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery, in the very act. Now in the law of Moses, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say?"
Okay. Before we go any further, let's ask ourselves a question. What specifically does the law of Moses teach about adultery?
Quite a few things. Let's go to the source.
My puzzled face.
Yes. We need to refresh on our viewers on Deuteronomy 22, verse 22.
Okay.
If a man is found lying with a married woman, then both of them shall die, the man who lay with the woman, and the woman. Thus you shall purge the evil from Israel. Now, I can't help but notice that they only brought one of the offending parties.
Yes. The story which is in chapter 8 of Gospel of John reminds me of anecdote about the rabbi and the priest. It's popular recent anecdotes about friendships of rabbis and priests. So a priest called Rabbi and says, "Rabbi, I need your help. I have a medical appointment. Can you come and sit for me a little bit at the confessionary booth?" And the rabbi responds, "Listen, Padre, my friend, I don't understand your business at all. So don't worry, Rabbi. Just come and sit. I will teach you very quickly." So they sit together. Comes a young woman. Father, I sinned. What happened, my daughter? Adultery. How many times? 3 times. Okay, my daughter, by the power of the Holy Church, I absolve you from the sins. Go and pray 3 times to the Mary and put $20 in the offering box. And the rabbi says, all right, Padre, you can go. I think I got the idea what to do. So he sits, the young man comes. Father, I sinned. What happened? Adultery. How many times? Once. Okay, my son, go back home and do it two more times because we run special, $20 for 3 adulteries. And I can't help, John, by illustrating this with what you just said with an anecdote. So there was lots of anecdotes like this about religious leaders of today. So the rabbi, the priest, and a pastor were arrested for illegal gambling, and they were brought to the judge. And so the judge asked the priest, Padre, have you been illegally gambling? No, Your Honor, no. I swear by the Holy Church that I haven't done such an evil thing. All right. Then the judge asked the rabbi, the pastor. Yes, Pastor, have you been gambling? No, Your Honor. I am the born again Christian. How can I do such a thing in the eyes of the Lord? So then the judge asked the rabbi, Rabbi, have you been gambling? So the rabbi looks at the priest and looks at the pastor and looks at the judge and says, Your Honor, with whom? So basically, what is happening here is they claim that they caught this woman in the very act. You see the problem?
Yes.
Somebody's lying. In this whole story, somebody is lying. And there is the story explains here what is actually going on. Take a look at John 8, verse 6.
They were saying this, testing him, so that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground.
Yeah, so basically they were trying to catch him. So what they were doing kind of a fork. So if he says yes, they're not fools. They know what the Bible says. And they say, oh, you don't know the Torah. What kind of rabbi you are? We have only one woman. But if he says no, they expected, what do you think they're going to say?
You don't care about the law.
Yeah, you condone the adultery. So this is how they try to play him. Because again, they're trying, starting from chapter 7, and last lesson we discussed in chapter 7 was the last day of the great day of basically of the Passover, of the Sukkot, of the Feast of Tabernacles. And basically Jesus called himself living water. Now he's calling himself the light, just as we started. And that's also important because at night, after they finish the ritual of pouring the water over the altar, they have this great celebration light show at the court of the temple.
So he's intentional about the thematic imagery that is
Yeah.
happening at the same time he's doing all of these things.
Yeah. The chapter 7 and chapter 8 of the Gospel of John, I keep repeating this, that John is structured around the Jewish festivals. So chapter 7, it starts with the Feast of Tabernacles, the Sukkot. On chapter 8, they continue the Sukkot theme until all the way chapter 10, when we're going to have Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication. So that's just the structure. But so this story of who testifies for whom, Nicodemus is trying to defend Jesus, all this happening within this within the events surrounding the greatest day, because people are, Pharisees are trying to discredit Jesus as being the living water. And so they're trying to catch him, we don't believe him. He testifies only about himself. And this testify about himself comes as they fail to catch him. So how do they fail? So as you can see, they bring this woman. The way how it could happen actually in Jewish tradition is this very complicated law about the husband who has a jealousy and who can bring his wife to the temple for this, where they do the sacrifice of jealousy, and then the priest is going to give her bitter water, to test if she was impure or not, sexually impure. So what happens during the first time of Second Temple? The Pharisees, they reinterpret this law, because originally this law is actually very good law. It defends the woman because, hey, you suspect her, don't take her to court, take her to the Lord. If you really have a suspicion, offer a sacrifice that point out to Jesus. And then if you still have a suspicion, have her drink. If nothing happened, your suspicions are empty. So this kind of law protected the woman from unfair accusation, because if the husband could accuse his wife in committing adultery, he could divorce her without paying anything. So this law would prevent this. But what the Pharisees did in the first century BC, they twisted this law around and they turned it like this. They said, if the husband is jealous against somebody, he needs to bring 2 Pharisees as a witness and express the warning. So instead of helping the family, they're even creating this kind of additional strain and injustice for the woman. And then it says in this tradition, if the wife, after this warning, was seen in entering with the man inside the closed doors and spending their time enough to boil egg, she is suspected and presumed guilty and is taken from the husband all the way to the temple in Jerusalem. So this was very unfair and unjust, because in many cases, Roman soldiers and especially officers, they were behaving very dirty against Jewish women. And many times Jewish women were subject of harassments from, and even worse.
And assault.
And assaults from the Roman officers. But some of the husbands would use this as a pretext to divorce. So this was very unfair. And so this is how that woman is at the temple court, suspected of adultery, but nobody caught anybody in the act.
So it's this whole, they were in there long enough to boil an egg.
Yeah.
Wow.
But they say that we caught her in the act.
Yeah.
And this is false witness. So,
And yet they say his testimony is not true.
exactly. What do you think Jesus is writing to them on ascend, after which they all leave?
I don't know. I always believe that he's writing their sins in the sand.
Correct.
He says he's the light of the world. What does light do? It exposes what was in darkness.
Yeah.
Correct.
And it also says in that passage, Jesus tells them, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. So you can only imagine that he is exposing those darknesses.
Yeah. Take a look. This is what the law actually says. Because they ask, what does the law say? So instead of citing and going to where they want him to trap, Deuteronomy 22:22, he's leading them to Deuteronomy 19. Let's read Deuteronomy 19, verse 15 and 16 first.
A single witness shall not rise up against a man on account of any iniquity or any sin which he has committed. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter shall be confirmed. If a malicious witness rises up against a man to accuse him of wrongdoing,
Now let's keep reading 17 and 18
then both the men who have the dispute shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who will be in office in those days. The judges shall investigate thoroughly, and if the witness is a false witness, and he has accused his brother falsely, then you shall do to him just as he had intended to do to his brother. Thus you shall purge the evil from among you.
That false testimony.
Yes, so that sin was a false testimony. They were going to as far as false testimony, trying to trap Jesus. Instead, they fell into their own pit, which they were digging, because, hey, they never seen the woman in the act, so they deserve what they want. They deserve to be stoned. That's why he says, who is without sin, throw stone.
Yeah.
Yes, they deserve to be this way.
Yeah.
So basically, they were shamefully defeated in this dispute, and now they go back to him and say, we don't believe your testimony. They're upset that they tried to entrap Jesus in being not knowledgeable of the Torah, but they fell into their own traps.
And I love how this, we get to see just how beautiful the law of God is, right? Because it gets a bad rap sometimes, but that's because sinful men try to wield it as a cudgel. And then we have Jesus showing up and, no, this is what it looks like.
Yeah. And I wish we had more time to delve even further into that. And I'd like to encourage our viewers, thank you for joining us today. Continue reading through in that chapter in the light of our conversation today and read how Jesus responds in verses 14 through 18 and reflect on that just a little bit. I want to thank you again for joining us today. Please be sure to subscribe, share this with your friends, leave a comment for us. We'd love to have you come back next week. Have a great day.